Hello friend, I am Naren, your host. In this video, we're gonna talk about entry point and CMD directive in the Dockerfile. This is a very cool feature, but yet very confusing to many new beginner. Let's get started. Now, here is our agenda today. We are going to talk about CMD directive, also talk about entry point directive and entry point with CMD, meaning we will talk about the difference between entry point and CMD, and last we talk about when to use entry point and when to use CMD. So first let's talk about the CMD. CMD is nothing but a command that we are CMD is like more like a default command or argument for the container. So in the Dockerfile you specify CMD directive to execute a default command. When you run the container, this command will execute in the container when it is start, when the container is start. Now CMD command value can be override at the runtime, meaning you can also pass a command or argument when you are running the container. So your default command will be override if you provide any new command. Multiple CMD instruction can be added in the Dockerfile, but only the last CMD get executed. So this is the small information about the CMD. And there are two ways to define CMD in the Dockerfile: exe form and the shell form. Now it's the demo time. I will move to the my Ubuntu VM to show you the demo how you can define the CMD instruction in the Dockerfile and how to override the value of the default command. Okay, so in this demo we are going to create a Docker file where we are adding a CMD instruction, and then we are building an image and launch a container with the default CMD that was defined in the Docker file. And we also launch a container with a different command, or we override the command in that container. So before we do so, let me share my VM screen. Here is my VM. I'm going to logging in the VM, and this is the VM. This is the Ubuntu operating system. Let's open the terminal. Here in the terminal we can go to my folder called Narain, and here we can create a new folder, mkdir, that is, let's say, test_cmd, and then we go inside this folder. We can create a Docker file using a VI editor. Press I to insert the text in the file. So let's write from Ubuntu and colon latest, and write the CMD instructions, something like a command. We will display a hello world message, so we have a command echo, and then our message hello world, and close it, and we will save the file. Now we have the Docker file is ready. Let's build an image. So docker build, and we give a tag name of our new image. So what image name we have to give? More like let's say test cmd colon latest, and then press the dot at the end of the command, dot representing the Docker file in the current directory. So when you adding a dot, the Docker is understand that there is a Docker file exist in the current directory, and the Docker, if the Docker file exists, the Docker build a new image called testcmd from that Docker file. Let's hit the enter. It will trying to build, and the image build successfully. Let's check it out. Docker image, this command will help us to list all the images that exist. Right now I only have one image, that is we created just now, test underscore cmd. So now let's run the container without passing any command together with the container run command. Okay, so we will going to use the we will going to execute the default cmd instruction which was defined in the Docker file. So let's say docker run. To running a container, we have a command called docker run, and we going to using the interactive mode, and then you can specify the image name, that is test underscore cmd colon latest, and then hit the enter. A container has been run successfully, and it display the message hello world that was defined in the Docker file. Now let's run another container by overriding the command, more like echo hello naren. Okay, so let's say docker run. I'm going to using the same command, test cmd colon latest is my image name, and let's provide the command together with the docker run. So echo hello naren, and close the double quote and hit enter. The second container is run, and you can see it print the message hello naren. That means the default command which we defined in the Docker file get override at runtime. So this is how the cmd is working. So let's move back to the ppt, and we will talk about the entry point. So here is the ppt here. Let's go to the next slide, entry point directive. Now entry point is used to define a command for container that execute always when a container is start, same like cmd. Now in entry point, command cannot be override. Extra argument, if you pass any extra argument together with the docker run command, then it will get append in the main command. We will see demo for entry point directive as well, and then I will show you how it get appended. And there are two ways to define, same like a cmd. Cmd instruction in the docker entry point also have the two way to define in the docker file. You can either exe form or the cell form. Now let's take a look of entry point demo. In entry point demo, we will do the same steps what was executed in the cmd instruction demo. We will create a docker file, but this time we will not use cmd, but we will use the entry point. And then same way we will build the image, launch the container with the default command that we have, and then we will also try to override the command to see what happened. So let's move to the Ubuntu VM again, and we are here on my Ubuntu VM. So let's come out from the testcmd folder and create a new folder, mkdir, that is test entry point. We create a new folder, test entry point. Let's go inside the test entry point. Now we are inside the test entry point where we have to create a Docker file again for using for entry point. Let's say Docker file, press I to insert the text in the file. So from Ubuntu latest, and then we, instead of cmd, this time we are going to use entry point. So entry point, and here echo, let's say hello world, and that's it. Let's save the file. Now we have to build the image, so docker build command is used to build the image. We specify the -t option. This will more like give a new name, give a name to your new image that we are going to create from the docker file. So here let's give test underscore entry point colon latest, and dot, as we discussed earlier, dot representing the docker file in the current directory. So let's building, and here is the error. Let's check. We made a mistake. It's no, should not be a semicolon, but it should be a colon. Now let's building. We are building the image, and image building process has been done successfully. So docker images, this command will list all the images. So we have two images, and this time we created test entry points. So let's run the container. Docker run is help us to run a container, and we are going to interactive mode, and then pass the image name entry point colon latest, and a container has been run successfully, and it displayed the message which we specified in the docker file together with the entry point instruction hello world. Now let's run another container let's run another container by passing the command together with the docker run. So let's say echo hello naren, same like what we did in the cmd. Hit enter. This a container runs successfully and display a message, but this time a message is a little bit different. So whatever message was defined in entry point, we see that message, and extra arguments that we specify together with the docker run command is get appended. So this is the difference between docker entry point and docker. This is the difference between docker entry point and cmd. So now let's back to the ppt to back to the PPT. So here we are on the PPT. Now let's talk about the difference between entry point with CMD in the Docker file. See, the CMD, both entry point and CMD are define the default command, okay? But the way it execute, it's the main difference between both of them. So first let's talk about the CMD. Provide default command to the container when it is done, as we see in the demo. Default command can be override by docker run arguments. So this is the CMD related information, that the default command that you have specified in the docker file can be get overridden by docker run command. Now entry point is sets the process to run, meaning it's not providing a default command, but we are set a process to run when a container is start. Okay, And when we are saying process, meaning process can have multiple arguments that can be changed at the runtime. So that's why the argument get appended in the entry point. And they cannot override, but additional argument from the Docker run can be appended. So this is how it's difference between entry point and CMD. Now the important part is when to use CMD and when to use entry point. This is a good question when both are pretty much doing the same thing except the execution. Now the CMD, use CMD when you want to provide a default command or default argument that can be overridden by the user. Or use a CMD when a container run a basic script or command that might need to change. For example, let's say when you are running a container and you have some bash script to run, there is a possibility that different user run a different batch script. So this kind of the things can be go with the CMD. In another word, entry point, you can use entry point when you want to enforce a specific command that should always be executed. Entry point, you can, for example, like let's say when you are running a container, you want to make sure that a specific command should be get executed. This ensures that the main command is not accidentally overridden. Yeah, that's we already discussed. Now, use entry point for container that acts as a wrapper around a primary executable, often combined with the CMD to provide a default argument. That can be the use of the entry point. So that's it. Thank you all for watching this video, and if you are new to my video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and also do not forget to hit the bell icon button. Thank you very much. Thank you all.